Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our weekly chat with Jason Mackey, our Post-Gazette sports columnist. We've got a lot to get into today. Jason, the Steelers offseason under Omar Khan, it's their third. How does it compare to his first two so far? Obviously, we have a little room left to run here with the NFL draft coming up, but pretty much at the end of free agency. How is Omar Khan performing relative to years past? We're going to get into that. We're going to talk a little bit of colleges with spring ball getting started for Pitt, Penn State, West Virginia. Look back at Robert Morris's run through the NCAA tournament and the Horizon League tournament. What does their run say about college basketball and what's next for them? We're going to wrap up the show with our Pirates predictions, getting into what we think is going to happen with the Buccos this season. That segment will air on our Post-Gazette Pirates YouTube channel. So if you're on video, head over there for the third segment. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Flying down to Miami in a little bit. Looking forward to the real stuff starting. I like spring training. I've said that a lot, but man, there's just nothing that beats having real baseball back.
Having a game every night, something to talk about. We always appreciate that. Before we get into it, just want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Edgar Snyder and Associates. Law firms come and go, but what law firm has been here in Western Pennsylvania fighting for injury victims for more than 40 years? It's Edgar Snyder and Associates. What firm has a staff of over 130 people who live and work here? It's Edgar Snyder and Associates. Law firms come and go, but Edgar Snyder and Associates is a name you can always trust. So remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. If you've been hurt in an accident, call them at 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com. They're available 24/7. Jason, let's talk Steelers off season.
No. We don't need any more talk about that, Adam.
Yeah, we're done with that topic. So we're into the Steelers offseason and how it compares to the first few years under Omar Khan. We are recording this podcast on Wednesday morning because Jason has to get on a plane down to Miami for the Pirates opener. So if Russell Wilson signs between now and then, you'll have to tell us in the comments. So we're just going to assume for the sake of argument that he is added to the haul, whether it's tomorrow, 3 weeks from now, training camp, whenever, because Russell Wilson signed with the Giants Tuesday night. So that destination appears to be off the board for Aaron Rodgers. It really just seems like it's coming down to the Steelers and either retirement or waiting for an injury to happen come the summer. So, Jason, let's compare, what's going on. You have the biggest overall splash, I think, of the 3 years of his tenure with DK Metcalf, that trade. But I don't know that you see multiple contributors the way you have in previous off seasons. I think 2023 has signed Isaac Seumalo, Elandon Roberts, Larry Ogunjobi. Those guys got a lot of run the last couple of years. Last year, you signed Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, DeShon Elliott, Patrick Queen. These other guys like Darius Slay, I think he's probably going to get an extended look, but he's a little bit older. The Steelers have some younger options, so how will he end up competing with a guy like Corey Trice? I think that remains to be seen. Kenneth Gainwell is in that running backs room with Jaylen Warren. So there could be some, I think, maybe useful bit players from this, but it does not seem overall as strong of a class as in years past, or am I missing something here?
I don't know. I think it's tough to evaluate because we don't know the finality of it. I think probably more so than in past years, they're going to draft somebody that they fully expect to contribute right away. I think even last year, Troy Fautanu coming out and taking a starting spot, I mean, that was an encouraging development. Obviously, it didn't happen because of injury, but I don't think they drafted Troy Fautanu knowing that they would have to plug and play him right away. I could be wrong there, but I look at their first-round pick, and that's a defensive tackle they're going to bring in, at least in my opinion, it should be a defensive tackle that they're going to bring in and ask to stop the run and ask to fortify their front pretty quickly. I think it is, I don't know, I wasn't good in science, Adam. So is it more on mass or volume? Like they had a big deal move with DK Metcalf as opposed to a couple smaller moves. I really like it. I think it's a dynamic, game-changing move for the Steelers. I think it is bigger and more effective than, if you want to add up Elandon Roberts, Patrick Queen, and DeShon Elliott, I still think it's more impactful than those. And I mean, we're also talking about the biggest, most important position on the field is still theoretically out there. I can't tell you right now who's going to start for the Steelers at quarterback week 1 of the season. Maybe it's Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's Mason Rudolph. I mean, shoot, maybe Shedeur Sanders falls to them in the draft and they start. I think that's unlikely. I just think right now we kind of have to say it's incomplete, and I think it's different. I mean, I know we get paid to compare one thing to the other. That's sort of like the, genesis of sports writing or sports media. I just don't see them all that comparable.
Well, I think part of why I'm seeing this offseason the way I do too is that you only have 2 picks in the first 3 rounds compared to 4 the last couple of years. That made it easier to find those contributors in the draft. Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton. I've liked a lot of what they've done in the draft these last couple of years.
Sure.
But you're not going to be able to do quite as much. So I think you look at the free agency haul, and even if you say, maybe I like it a little bit more. Maybe I like it, on par with what Omar Khan's done the last couple of seasons. The draft is probably going to just not yield as much simply on as a matter of they don't have as many picks.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I don't disagree with that one bit. And my argument for not being able to compare one to the other, I mean, they got Russell Wilson, but they got him on a bargain basement contract because of a freak situation in Denver. They're going to go out and get another Super Bowl winning, veteran quarterback. Theoretically, I'm saying if they do the Aaron Rodgers thing, that's not going to be on an absurd discount. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to come in here and play for the league minimum or close to it. Like, I think they're going to be allocating, 15, 20, 30, 40. I have no idea. But I mean, that's a significant amount of money allocated to a quarterback that, he's the guy. Even last offseason, they bring in Russ. There's still Fields. Mike Tomlin says he's in pole position. But, I don't know. I think we all sort of saw Fields having some role. We didn't know what it would be at the time. But yes, you're right that they're not going to be accumulating, at least as we sit here now, accumulating as much talent through the draft because they don't have a second-round pick. Part of that's tied into DK Metcalf. I'm also curious how much, can they replenish that pick? I think that would probably matter a great deal to the Steelers. No, I don't know how you easily go about replacing a second-round pick. I mean, maybe that becomes a George Pickens trade. Maybe it's a part of something else. I don't know, but it wouldn't shock me if they wound up with additional draft picks some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and we've seen them make those moves, and maybe it's as simple as a pick swap. You swap from the 4th into the 3rd.
Right. Like a draft day trade. Totally.
Yeah, we've seen more of that from the Steelers in recent years, so we can't rule that out as a possibility. But let me ask you this. Let me ask it this way. How much would a draft in which Omar Khan crushes it, and let's just assume for the sake of argument that you're going to come out with as many picks as you have now. You're not going to make any draft day trades. But if they get that defensive tackle in the first round, if they get a guy that they really like in the 3rd round that's able to step in, and let's maybe say one of those later round picks works out, and maybe they don't start, but they're playing a lot in some form or fashion in some role. Let's say they get 3 solid players for year 1 out of this draft. How much would that change your perception of the offseason one way or the other?
I mean, I don't have a negative perception of the offseason. So, I mean, it's not like I need convinced that it's better, but I'm not going to take this and go run to the bank and start talking about the con artist and all these things that are going to be different. Like, at this point, Adam, I don't know what it would take for me to feel differently about the Steelers finishing 10-7 or 9-8. And I wish that one draft would change that, and it just doesn't. And I don't know whether it's because of the head coach. I don't know whether it's just because of pure numbers and what we've seen out of this team lately. And also just how much hinges on the potential of Aaron Rodgers not being there, another quarterback. Did they draft? And that's what I mean about the unknown. So, I mean, yes, it would be great if Omar Khan crushed the draft. Obviously, you want him to do that. I just don't know how much it's going to change for me to make me think that they're going to be any better than a 10-7 team right now. I think an enormous amount, and I'm sorry to keep going back to this, but it's what I feel hinges on Aaron Rodgers' ability to stay healthy, to produce, to be a functional quarterback, to be the good version of himself. Like, if he's the guy he was through 6-7 weeks last year with the Jets, I mean, the Steelers are probably a 5-6-7 win team. If he's the guy he was over the final 10 weeks, yeah, I think we might have something here if Omar Khan does a good job drafting and they can fortify the offensive line.
To what extent is the compensatory picks for 2026 part of this conversation in the big picture? Because I think that is the piece that we're not looking at as a huge part of 2025, because you're not going to realize those gains, but you might have 3-4 extra picks in the 2026 draft in Pittsburgh, and that's going to be a big deal at the end of this season. Do you consider that as part of the acquisition process? Overall, and how does that impact your view of what Omar Khan's done, even if there's not immediate results?
You know what it made me think of, Adam, honestly, is Kyle Dubas and kind of what he's doing. I mean, it's not the same thing. It's not apples to apples, but one, it's never a bad thing to get more picks. And two, they're also capital. We don't have to think of them. And I've been guilty of this. I think fans are probably guilty of this, thinking of them as players taken. They can be used to move up. They can be used to manipulate the draft to fit your needs. Their purest form, maybe I'll say it that way. Yeah, they can be used to replace talent, and that's good. But they're going to need a left guard very soon. Isaac Seumalo isn't going to be around for much longer. Cam Hayward, what he did last season was great. Father Time is undefeated. Sooner or later, it's going to happen. They're going to have to figure out a second wide receiver after this year, at least based on what we know now with George Pickens. Running backs are always going to be a need. Obviously, quarterback long-term has not been solved. So, yeah, I mean, I look at that as part of the build. I look at that as part of what Omar Khan is going to have to continually do. It's important now. It's important in the future. It'll be important when we're in 2026 for him to get compensatory picks in 2027 and 2028, or, however many assets that he can stockpile. I don't know. I feel like that's a cop-out answer where you say it's always a part of something, but I don't know how it can't be.
No, I agree. And I think it's in some ways why I'm trying to reframe how I view this offseason as it does not seem like an offseason designed to go out and change the trajectory right now. Just as you were mentioning, it
sounds like you're kind of down on it.
I am down on it in the small picture. I don't really believe in this team changing much in the next year, but I do look at those compensatory picks and say that seems to be their way of kind of resetting here and trying to figure out a way to change the trajectory without going straight into the tank. And maybe they will. And I know you've talked about this in your columns, and maybe the Aaron Rodgers thing is a kind of a ploy to make it look like they're trying to compete and still look like they're going for the playoffs, but maybe it ends up in kind of a tank situation. Maybe you end up having a season a lot like the Jets did, and you're drafting higher in the draft, and you're doing what a lot of people have been calling for, which is taking one on the chin to change things for the longer term. Maybe this is that in disguise. So yeah, I don't feel great about 2025. That's
fair. I don't want to be framed as sitting here being all positive about it. We're probably in the same boat, 9-8, 10-7. Nothing's changed my mind from that.
Yeah, but they are at least, kind of having a little bit more foresight about, where you go beyond the season. Whereas I think for the first couple of years of Omar Khan, and certainly for the final few years of Kevin Colbert, it was all about the year in front of them. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Jason, we're going to get into the colleges briefly here in a second. Before we do, just want to thank another couple of sponsors. Pittsburgh, are you ready to train like a champion? UFC Gym has everything for total body health under one roof. They have group classes for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Zumba, personal training, cardio weights, cryotherapy, infrared saunas, and more, all at an unbeatable price. Not sure where to begin? All members get a starter session with an expert coach to help map out your fitness plan. Your first visit is on us. Drop in with free parking at Market Square or the waterfront, and follow UFC Gym Pittsburgh on social media. Train different, feel unstoppable at UFC Gym. Thank you to them. We also want to pass along this message from our friends in Bradenton, Florida.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
We are back on the weekly chat with Jason Mackey, our Post-Gazette sports columnist. I'm Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for Multimedia. Jason, we're going to talk some spring ball here. Pitt, Penn State, West Virginia either are or getting into their spring practice schedules. A lot going on this offseason. Obviously, Penn State coming off the Orange Bowl appearance. I think they're hoping to be back in that same mix next season in that top 5-6 teams in the country competing for a national championship. West Virginia brings in Rich Rodriguez to replace Neil Brown. So that's a huge storyline. Rodriguez's return to Morgantown. Then Pitt obviously is trying to bounce back from this kind of persistent mediocrity. Other than the ACC championship year, they're right back in that 6, 7, 8 win range. What storyline are you watching most closely as spring ball begins, given what we've seen this offseason so far?
Out of all three schools, Adam?
Yes.
Drew Allar at Penn State. I think that is the key to Penn State being more than, I don't want to say they were a lucky Final Four school, but if you want to start talking about a national championship and elite play and whatever, they need elite quarterback play. He was good. I need him to be great. I think he can be great. You may disagree with this. I know there's an undercurrent of Penn State fans that have gotten frustrated with Drew Allar, but I think he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the country next year. Wouldn't shock me at all if that's the case. I think Penn State really has an opportunity to be an outstanding football team, maybe be ranked one in the country to start, certainly to challenge for that ranking. I think it's going to be a really exciting season with what the Nittany Lions have coming back. And that's nothing against Eli Holstein, who I think, was part of that second half collapse for Pitt. I think there's a lot more there. Desmond Reid, same thing, year 2 in Cade Bell's offense. I think there's still a lot of meat on that bone, man. But where they're at compared to what kind of the national story it can be, how intriguing it is. I think a lot of Drew Allar, but I think there's still a lot there, and I'm really curious to see where this goes.
I'm actually not down on Drew Allar at all. I caught a ton of flack that year that Penn State went to the Rose Bowl, beat Utah, for saying that they should bench Drew Allar, or they should bench Sean Clifford and go to Drew Allar because Drew Allar was clearly the future. Yeah. And it was his 6th season. We knew what we were getting from Sean Clifford. Penn State decided to stick with him. People can decide whether the Rose Bowl victory was enough. They still didn't win the big games, other than the granddaddy of them all. So I've been calling for Drew Allar since then. I think that he has been done dirty with the talent that he's had around him, specifically at receiver. Obviously, Tyler Warren, has an amazing season, becomes that safety blanket last year. But beyond Tyler Warren, he just didn't have guys he could trust. You saw that with the interception in the playoff game. The receiver runs a lazy route. It's
not a great ball. Also not a ball Allar should have thrown.
Maybe not, Jason, but I think he was trying to make things happen because you can win the game with 3 points, and if you go to overtime, all bets are off. So I don't blame him for taking the chance nearly as much as I think other people do. So all that being said, I believe in him. My question is whether Devonte Ross, Kyron Hudson are enough. I think we talked about them in that first week that the transfer portal was open. Back in January, Penn State made those ads, and I liked them as depth. I don't know if I like them as a number 1 and a number 2. So do you need to see Penn State do more in this second transfer portal window to maybe get another guy in here? Or do you think that they have what they need to compete for a national championship?
I'd certainly want more. Because I would think last year, they bring in Julian Fleming from Ohio State, and I think you thought the problem was solved, and it most certainly was not. So, yeah, I don't think they should take their foot off the gas until they've got 4 or 5 guys who are fighting over getting targets, and we're a long way from that. Now, do I think Penn State is going to throw the football a ton next year? No, I don't. I don't see why you would. With Singleton and Allen coming back, they're going to have the best backfield duo in the country. James Franklin's going to pound the crap out of that thing, as he should. But, yeah, you can't go through a big deal game, which Penn State did, and not have a catch by a wide receiver. That's just insanity. So I'm never going to say they shouldn't get more out of the transfer portal. I like the talent they have there now. It's just sort of like we're talking about with Omar, Adam. You just got to keep adding. You got to keep adding. And they're still a ways from that.
Yeah, I think the concern, certainly I think they're going to put up huge yardage on the ground. It's just if you end up in a back and forth game like you did with Notre Dame, if you can't throw the ball,
right,
you're going to be at a disadvantage. And now, you don't have that Tyler Warren safety blanket. I love Luke Reynolds at tight end. I think he can be something approximating Tyler Warren in terms of, just as a target and a pass catcher, but he's not going to be the versatile weapon that Tyler Warren was. So you're going to have to make up for that in some form or fashion. So that's what I'm watching this spring. Can they start to get that passing game together? Jason, you also wrote about Robert Morris this week. That was before we got the news that St. Francis up in Loretto, PA, is dropping down from Division I to Division III.
They're not going to like facing my Titans, Adam.
I know, right?
I hope they're ready to face the Westminster attack. All right, I'm done.
No, but I think that was disappointing for some people that St. Francis makes their second NCAA tournament first since 1991, and the immediate move for them is to drop down to Division III, just because, partially the nature of NIL, that fan support and being able to consistently get competitive players in here. Robert Morris makes it to the round of 64 after winning the Horizon League, loses to Alabama, and an interesting game, Jason. They were in it for a good chunk of time. And then Alabama's talent just kind of took over in that last 10 minutes. But Robert Morris was right there. You wrote that you're, enjoyed the run, but you're lamenting that it's probably going to get broken up in some form or fashion because that is the nature of college sports these days. Do you want to talk about the column a little bit and your feelings about Robert Morris before we, maybe talk a little bit about the big picture stuff?
Yeah. And I mean, one is tied into the other. In my column, this was just a thought that I had about, this was so fun. I loved following these guys. I loved watching these guys. They're bringing back 13 of 15 players, or I should say 13 of 15 have eligibility remaining. We'll be lucky to see half of those guys on campus next year. And that stinks. I know as a kid growing up, I loved seeing if a college team you were following, it didn't go well. So-and-so's coming back. So-and-so's coming back. They're going to be this much better next year. Think about that experience gain. Oh, it's going to eat at them. They're going to mature. Oh, they're going to be that much better. All of that stuff goes out the window right now in college sports. And honestly, I'm 41. It makes me feel like I'm 71. It irritates the crap out of me. And I had this internal struggle going on in my head where of course I don't fault Amarion Dickerson or Alvaro Folgeras for wanting to make the best opportunity or the best situation for them. Of course not. Andy Toole should do the same thing, or Cam Woods or whatever. I'd be the world's biggest hypocrite by saying they shouldn't do that. They should. But it does stink for continuity and for fans and those following college sports and what college sports are supposed to be about. The essence of college sports, it's loyalty. It's cheering for somewhere that makes you happy, that where you went to school, there's pride, there's all this stuff. And, any of these places, whether it's St. Francis, Robert Morris, Penn State, Pitt, they're just really stops on a pseudo pro tour for a lot of these guys.
Can I devil's advocate this here for a second, Jason?
Sure, do it.
Would these seasons have been possible from Duquesne and Robert Morris the last couple of years without the transfer portal? Obviously, Duquesne was in that, they had guys coming back for 50 years since they made the NCAA tournament in the 1970s, but it never quite worked out for them. They're able to get talent a little bit more freely, and they go to the NCAA tournament and they have a run that a lot of Duquesne fans are never going to forget. Robert Morris obviously changed conferences 5 years ago, has not always been easy in going from the NEC to the Horizon League. They're able to get some of these guys that you just mentioned in here to make that run to the NCAA tournament. So do you look at that at all and say it can cut both ways? That, yes, there's a lack of continuity, but in some cases, maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. This isn't a criticism of those programs. You could also recruit better. You could recruit differently. You could develop players. You could find gems that other programs can't find. I mean, I think it has helped. And I think there's certain things with college sports today, Adam, I'm not altogether against it. I don't have any problem with players getting paid, but I think there should be a system here to regulate it. I don't think it should be the wild, wild west. I don't think guys should leave one program, go to another, and take NIL money with them. As long as you're here in this program, you get this money. If you leave, it go. I think there are certain regulatory guardrails that are missing right now. So, I mean, yes, I do think you're right on the transfer portal. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think the transfer portal can be a good, useful tool. I just hate that every year you have free agency. That's what it is. I wish there was a way to regulate it a little bit more. And I don't know if I have a great answer in the middle of a podcast right now about this. I mean, maybe like once in your college tenure, you can do it, not every year. I don't know if that's even right. Like, it's a half-baked thing that we're just thinking of now. What I'm saying is I wish there was some more thought given to how free and easy this stuff is right now.
I think the part of the answer to the question, Jason, is the most professional thing you can have, which is contracts. And you know, if you're a player coming up as maybe you're a 3-star, maybe you want the you know, the continuity and the expectation that you're going to have a spot in a program. So because it should bind the programs as well, because sometimes you'll see guys kind of get pushed out at the periphery of the roster, you know, because the program wants to move on with some other people. So I think if you had contracts that were binding for both sides, you'd see less of that from the programs, but then you'd see less of the players just bolting for an extra, you know, small amount of money compared to what they're making at the other school.
But why should college kids be guaranteed playing time? Professionals aren't guaranteed playing time. They're paid money. If the Pirates sign somebody and someone comes in and plays better, you're going to the bench. That's the same thing that should happen in college sports. If you're drawing a salary, I have no sympathy for you. Like, when college sports was pure amateurism, that's fine. You need to treat it a certain way. And I think there's still a degree of that. But if you're getting paid $1 million, like, you're a professional. You're a professional. I don't care if you get replaced. I don't, you know, you are a professional athlete for all intents and purposes. You may go to class, but like, you got $1 million, you're doing all right. I don't think anybody who's on an NIL deal like that should be guaranteed playing time just for simply committing to a school.
No, I don't. I don't think.
Maybe I misinterpreted. I'm sorry.
I'm not talking about in terms of playing time. I'm talking about it in terms of a roster spot.
Sure.
You know, where, you know, if you're going to go to college, shouldn't you, you know that you're going to be able to stay in your scholarship or in your NIL situation. So I think it's important to bind the programs in that way, because we talk about loyalty. It's a two-way street. It's not always just the players, and we've seen, you know, especially in the SEC, they would mill through entire recruiting classes and sign 30 guys every year because they were kicking 10, 15 guys out of the program. You know, that's the way it was kind of in that old world. So I think you want to take some of that, get rid of that, and then also on the other side, have the players have to commit and say, you know, I only want to be here for 1 year. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to sign a 1-year contract. Or, you know, I'm happy here. I'm going to sign a 3-year contract because I want the stability. That's the most professional step that they can take. I think people are going to resist that, but I think that's where this ultimately needs to end up. Jason, we are going to get into the Pirates on the other side of this break. Looking forward to that conversation. If you're on audio, we're going to stay right here. It's all going to be one recording. If you're on YouTube, head over to the Pirates channel so we can have that chat. Looking forward to making our predictions and seeing where the season goes. All right, we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.